will already have heard some of the basics surrounding this planet. But my promise to you is that much of what you will learn from this presentation you will have never heard anywhere else. And that's a fact. I spent a lot of time doing what's called exegesis. It really means uncovering the language. It means interpreting the language, but I don't like to use that word because the truth is not interpreted. There is a truth. There is a uniqueness to truth. And it doesn't have anything to do with one's interpretation. And I spent a lot of time doing exegesis and have over the years. And this information that you're going to hear tonight is a result of some very in-depth, hardcore exegesis that I've done for more than a decade. So without further ado, let me start reading from my paper that I've written for my students entitled The Red Dragon and the Sheep, The Return of Nibiru. To begin solving the mystery of the planet known as Nibiru, or Planet X, here is an excerpt about this specific topic from Chapter 14 of my first book, Blueprint for Bondage, found at blueprintforbondage.com. A story has been passed down from an ancient people known as the Sumerians, who lived in an area known as Mesopotamia, meaning the land between two rivers. These two rivers are the Tigris and Euphrates, and this geographical area, also known as the cradle of civilization, is now occupied by Iraq, eastern Syria, and southern Turkey. The story tells of a planet that has appeared periodically throughout history, about every 3,600 years, and that was knocked out of its orbit during Satan's rebellion. Throughout their writings, the Sumerians speak of the appearance of this planet, which they refer to as Nibiru or Niburu, and describe it as an anticipated, observable, and predictable event that would bring rains, much flooding, upheavals, and great earth events, as its strong gravitational and electrical effects had been known to do in the past. Just like the Sumerians, the Hebrew or Israelite prophets spoke of a planet's approach to Earth and its becoming visible to man, and considered it a time of ushering in a new era. Pardon me. If the ancient Hebrew prophets are referring to planet Nibiru, or Planet X, as it is commonly called today, just as the Sumerians were, then the words of Isaiah chapter 13, verses 5 through 11, 13, 17, and 19 make perfect sense. Isaiah tells us in that passage, "They come from a far country, from the end of heaven, even the Lord and the weapons of his wrath, to destroy the whole land." And the word country here is Eretz, E-R-E-T-S, in the original Hebrew. It literally means earth. The phrase end of heaven is Katzeh Shamayim, which means, in the Hebrew, outskirts or extremity of the visible universe. So what we have here is literally something coming from a distant earth, from the extremities of the visible universe, with its weapons of destruction. The passage continues, "Howl ye, for the day of the Lord is at hand. It shall come as a destruction from the Almighty. Therefore shall all hands be faint, and every man's heart shall melt, and they shall be afraid. Pains and sorrows shall take hold of them. They shall be in pain as a woman that travails." And this is a reference to a woman travailing in Revelation chapter 12 that I will speak about shortly. And the word travail is yalad, Y-A-L-A-D, and means to bear a child. They shall be amazed at one another. Their faces shall be as flames. Behold, the day of the Lord comes, cruel both with wrath and fierce anger, to lay the land desolate, and he shall destroy. The Hebrew word for destroy is shamad, which means literally to exterminate. He shall destroy the sinners out of it. Again, we see an extermination taking place just as in Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. As I explain in detail in my paper entitled Cinderella and Other Tales of the Fairies, P-H-A-R-I-E-S, at my learning network, innercircle.us. "For the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof will not give their light. The sun shall be darkened in his going forth, and the moon shall not cause her light to shine. And I will punish the world for their evil, and the wicked for their iniquity. And I will cause the arrogance of the proud to cease, and I will lay low the haughtiness of the terrible. Therefore I will shake the heavens, and the earth shall move out of her place in the wrath of the Lord of hosts, and in the day of his fierce anger. Behold, I shall stir up the Medes against them, which shall not regard silver. And as for gold, they shall not delight in it. Their bows also shall dash the young men to pieces, and they shall have no pity on the fruit of the womb. Their eyes shall not spare children. In Babylon, the glory of kingdoms shall be as when the figure known by the letters YHWH shall be as when Yahweh overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. And this is not saying that this is brought on by the figure known by the Tetragrammaton, YHWH, but it is comparing it to the destruction brought on Sodom and Gomorrah by that figure. So please bear that in mind. To add support to this idea of the planet Nibiru returning and causing great chaos, Immanuel Velikovsky demonstrated rather convincingly in his book Worlds in Collision that there was massive evidence of both a literary and scientific nature that great catastrophic earth changes had occurred during the second millennium BC due to cometary showers and the close passage of Venus. He settled on a date of 1450 BC. However, more recent scientific evidence points to the date actually being closer to 1628 BC. There's also evidence for a disruption around 5200 BC, 8800 BC, 12,400 BC, 16,000 BC, 19,600 BC, and by logical extension every 3,600 years previously for an indefinite and unknown period of time. What is more, if the last return was in 1628 BC, we are not just due, we are overdue for the next one, for the next return of Nibiru. Considering the scientific evidence for the catastrophic earth changes that occurred around 1628 BC, we must ask ourselves if there is any biblical evidence that suggests that something significant occurred during that time, that same time frame. And the answer is absolutely yes. In the beginning of the Bible, there is a description of an event that took place during this time, around 3,600 years ago. The occurrences that surrounded this event seem to perfectly fit the description of the effects that planet X, or Nibiru, has on the Earth, based on what we find in ancient manuscripts. What's even more interesting is that the occurrences that surrounded this event 3,600 years ago are very similar to those described in the book of Revelation, which outlines what will happen in the end of the world, or age. Other ancient manuscripts describe these same events and confirm that this planet does indeed come into sight and does indeed cause great cataclysmic events to occur on the earth. Two of these other corroborating texts are the Mayan prophecies and the Kolbrin Bible. First, the Kolbrin Bible describes in detail a massive celestial body known as the Destroyer. The description of this destroyer correlates to the quote-unquote far earth in the Isaiah passage just noted, possibly to the destructive celestial body known as wormwood in the book of Revelation, as well as the warning of the red comet to arrive in 2012, or, as some would say, December 24th, 2011, according to the Mayan calendar, which is the other ancient source of note. The Kolbrin Bible is a substantial biblical-era wisdom text of immense value. The earliest books of this ancient manuscript were written following the Hebrew exodus from Egypt. Free of religious divides, the Kolbrin Bible offers a non-judgmental view of ancient times that bridges secular and non-secular thought. It also projects dire and urgent warnings from across the millennia to those of us living today. The message of the Kolbrin Bible is clear. We will soon face natural disasters that will visit death and havoc upon us on an unimaginable scale. It also provides unique insights into the current perturbations or the unexplained vibrations or movements happening throughout our solar system and the ever-quickening pace of natural disasters and plagues that now beset us. Now, some of what I'm reading to you comes from my book, Blueprint for Bondage, and these are quotes. If you'd like to see the bibliography, I'd be happy to send it to you. or you can go to blueprintforbondage.com. To be aware of this planet and its soon return is very important, but just how important? Important enough for the United States government to sit up and take notice. America has spent huge sums to deploy what they call the South Pole Telescope in Antarctica. The final installation will be a size of a mini-mall and will require a massive C-130 airlift effort to transport pre-assembled modules and a large staff to the most desolate, inhospitable, and inaccessible region of the world. Why? Because Planet X, or Nibiru, was first sighted by NASA in 1983 and even reported in 5 major American newspapers before it was squashed the very next day. This discovery spurred the USA to build the SPT, or the South Pole Telescope, humanity's new Planet X tracker. And that, since the writing of my book, that is now in place. That's been put into place in Antarctica, as you may know. The ancient peoples who speak of this planet also speak of the inhabitants of this planet and call them gods and even give them a name, the Anunnaki. The word Anunnaki means, literally, those who from heaven to earth came. They were said to fly in spacecraft and were attributed with great knowledge that they passed on to the inhabitants of the earth. This incoming planet has been the subject of many books over the last decade. Those who govern us absolutely know it is coming, as we've seen in the text from my book above, but they refuse to acknowledge its existence. Another primary example of this is what has been done to its coordinates on Google Sky. You can view the area of the constellation of Orion, from which Nibiru is said to be coming, by going to google.com/sky or Wikisky, WIKISKY.com, and typing in the coordinates 5 hours, 53 minutes, 27 seconds, -6, 10, apostrophe 58. And how this reads when you type it out is 5 and a lowercase h, space, 53, lowercase m, 27 s, lowercase s that is, space, -6, space, 10, apostrophe, space, 58. Again, that's 5h, space, 53m, space, 27s, space, -6, space, 10, apostrophe, space, 58. Now, when I did this in late 2010, the entire area was blocked off by a black rectangle, but the fringes of it were red, making it obvious that something was behind it. The word around the internet says that this blacked out area is no longer viewable, and those sources have blended the area in to look like the rest of the sky. This is entirely possible, as the telescope software used by them is not a live application, so they could insert whatever they wanted into these coordinates. They've done everything they can to hide this object and deny its existence up to this point, so any steps to further suppress the public's awareness of it would not surprise me. After comparing what the Bible has to say with what the Sumerian language says, here is what I know about Nibiru, Niburu, or Planet X. The logograms in the Sumerian cuneiform, the language of the Sumerians, are incredible, in that they can be combined in many different ways. In doing so, one word can tell an entire story and paint an accurate picture all along the way. The logograms describing this planet are no different. The logograms Ni and Buru mean one's own fruit tree. So Ni Buru means one's own fruit tree. This is because the planet is the same fruit tree from which the fruit was taken by the figure Eve in the biblical allegory of the Garden in Eden. The logograms Ni and Buru, the logograms Ni and Buru also mean to release or tear out and one's own. To release or tear out one's own. This is telling us of the coming harvest of the fruit that was previously stolen during the planet's coming passing as you'll see below. Ni bir u, N-I plus the logogram B-I-R plus U means that one to remove sleep. This refers to the sleep that we are told has been poured out on everyone by the figure known by the Tetragrammaton YHWH in Isaiah 29:10. Let me say that again. N-I plus B-I-R plus U means that one to remove the sleep. This refers to the sleep that was poured out by the figure known as who some would call Yahweh in Isaiah 29:10. This is the same sleep, or tardima in the Hebrew, which means trance, that Adam was put into by that same figure, who some refer to as Jehovah or Yahweh, when Adam's fruit or rib was stolen. This name of the planet is telling us how this trance will soon be removed. After all, we were never told that Adam woke up from this sleep. Nibiru is also the dwelling place of the Father, known in the Bible by different names in various allegories. He is called Adam, Abraham, Esau, Esau, who some call Jesus, etc., who either took something out of themselves, such as the hidden meaning of Genesis 12:5, or had something stolen from them by a woman. Regardless of what you've been taught, these are all names for the same person, related to us in different stories. The woman of Revelation 12, who was clothed with the sun, meaning injected with the shine, when you translate that properly, unlawfully took the seed from the red dragon, which was Nibiru, or Nibiru, the fruit tree, or fig tree, of Matthew 24:32 and Mark 13:28, which is now putting forth its leaves. And to read more about this parable and an in-depth analysis of it, you can read my paper, The Meaning of the Prophecy of the Parable of the Fig Tree. Figs are also red when they are ripe, incidentally. Eve also unlawfully took the fruit from the tree in the garden, in Eden. The figure known as Yahweh also took the rib from Adam, who actually was one of the trees of the garden, according to Ezekiel chapter 31. Can you see a pattern emerging here? It's one of those things that is right in front of us and has been for literally thousands of years, but disconnected until we start to piece together the themes. Let's look at some of the various characters and pieces of this story a bit more closely and the characteristics they share across different stories retold throughout the Bible. The character of the Father. This refers to Adam, who was also the first Christ, according to 1 Corinthians 15:45, and whose name also means red. The fruit tree. This is simply a reference to the fig tree, whose figs are red when they are ripe. Isaac, when taken back to the Sumerian logograms, means red bone. Esau, Isaac's firstborn son, whose birthright was stolen by the scheme of his mother Rebekah. His name means red also. Nibiru is referred to as the red planet by the ancients, and Esau, who some incorrectly call Jesus, which is simply a play on the name Esau, E-S-A-U, meaning red, is also the firstborn of creation, according to Colossians 1:15, just as we're told Adam was, whose name we've already seen, also means red. Let's look at the character of the rebellious bride. This feminine figure is known in the Bible under different names or aliases. She is known as Eve, the one who took this forbidden fruit, Rebekah, who stole her red son's birthright, Mary, the mother of Esau, or Jesus, whose name, Mary's name, by the way, means rebellious, Jezebel, Delilah, Lilith, the woman clothed with the sun of Revelation 12, who stole the seed, the figure hidden behind the letters YHWH, who took Adam's rib after putting him into a trance, as well as the one who Isaiah 14:12 describes as fallen, which is Lucifer. Yahweh, or Jehovah, by the way, is an alias and backward rendering from the Aramaic language of the name Anunnaki, who are the fallen ones. And the word Yada, the root of the letters YHWH, in Hebrew means to fall, as I show in detail in my paper entitled Name Changes in the Bible and the Sacred Spiral of the Ark at innercircle.us. The seed. Let's look at the seed. The seed is used as a metaphor for fruit. The seed or sperm of a man, knowledge, Adam's rib, the true meaning of which I will share with you shortly, Esau, the red seed of the red Isaac, Jesus or Esu, and the red dust from which the red Adam was taken. I explain the hidden story of the red dust of Genesis 2 in more detail also at the Inner Circle. This woman who was engaged in this theft was pregnant with twins, probably a metaphor for being full of knowledge of two-sided DNA, or the Serapenta, as it's called, or you can call it the serpent. We'll get to that momentarily. And was ready to deliver or bring to earth that with which she could no longer contain. Just as someone who has knowledge of a big secret, for instance, they think that they must deliver. See Revelation 12. One of the children was Jesus, whose name really should be Esu, E-S-U, or Kingu, as he is called in the Sumerian creation epic called the Enuma Elish. This child was killed and went to be with the Father, just as it says in chapter 12 of Revelation. The other child was from Satan, just as I say about one of Eve's children in my book, Blueprint for Bondage. And I'll get to that in a moment. Suffice to say for now, the two quote-unquote kids were merged to create us. These can be seen as the good seed and the bad seed, Cain and Abel, Jacob and Esau, Isaac and Ishmael, or Jesus, or Esu, and his twin, that is referred to in a shrouded manner in Revelation chapter 12. No matter how you look at it, these stories of the mixing of the seed that was stolen with the seed of man. That's what these stories are about. This is also the story of the iron mixing with clay in Daniel chapter 2, verse 43. The seed mixed with the clay of man is from the evil child of the woman, Jesus or Esu's twin, who Genesis 12 tells us will rule over us with a rod of iron. This is currently the situation in our world. I've said before many times that because we can do something does not mean that we should. And there has never been a more glaring example of what can happen than the situation that has been brought about in our world today, which was a result of the rebellion of this woman. And once again, I'll remind you that the name Mary, the mother of Jesus or Esu, means rebellious. We've seen the devastating results of a world that embraces technology and they don't fully understand in the form of genetic and chemical manipulations going on today with Monsanto, the GMOs, the sheep, stem cell research, pharmaceuticals, and on and on. And this woman, just like many scientists today, was seduced or beguiled by the knowledge she had of the Serapenta, S-E-R-A-P-E-N-T-A, which is a metaphor for DNA in its current form, which I will explain momentarily, which she stole from the father, the fig tree, or the red planet, Nibiru, whose name means the same thing, one's own fruit tree. She was not necessarily seduced by an actual serpent, although the jinn, G-I-N, from which she got this knowledge are said to be from Saturn, as I'll show below, and are said to be reptilian. You can watch the new version of the movie Clash of the Titans and look at the reptilian jinn, who wields the blue fire to see a theatrical depiction of these jinn. What this woman stole and misused was knowledge of how to mix the rib or figs with material that she received from the jinn. This information was contained in what the Sumerians refer to in their logogram HAR, which is a spiral arm bracelet of silver or other precious metal. They're one and the same. What it really depicted, however, was DNA code, such as the law, as in Hammurabi's code, and it is the same thing that is incorrectly translated as the table of testimony that was put into the ark, upon which we are told the law was written. Once again, a metaphor for genetic code. One version of the Bible, however, from the 1800s, does translate the word table properly as tabat, and renders it as an arm bracelet. The word ark in the Bible is aron, A-R-O-W-N, in the Hebrew, and translates as the logograms har, H-A-R, and un, U-N, in Sumerian, which literally means har of the people, or you could say hair of the people. Knowing that the H-A-R, the har, represents DNA as the spiral arm bracelet, therefore, what it really means when it states in Exodus 25:16 and 40, verse 20, that they were to put the table, or har, into the ark, the har-un, is that Moses was receiving instructions to insert the genetic code, har, that he was given into the genetic code, har, of the people, un. This was literally genetic manipulation that was going on, and a blatant misuse of the father's seed that was stolen, as well as an abrogation of his instructions or law. You may be wondering why you've never heard this in church. Well, for obvious reasons. You're not supposed to know these things. They've hidden this for millennia. The Father is coming to reclaim that which was stolen, and the reclamation or shearing of the har from the sheep will be in the form of the red planet, Nibiru, from which it was originally taken. He will be taking back the seed that was stolen and tearing it off, just as we saw earlier, of the other son's genetics, who was from another father, which was added to it, the DNA or har of the second child, with which she, his rebellious wife, was pregnant, or of which she had knowledge. And you can see the same story hidden in mythology. This second child was from Satan, or Saturn, or the jinn, G-I-N, or the reptilians, as I've said above. The word for Lucifer in Latin is phosphorus. When phosphorus becomes oxygenated, it becomes a phosphate, also known in genetic terms as a pyran, P-Y-R-A-N, meaning a six-sided molecule, which is also the thing that was added to the first seed called the rib, taken from Adam, which is a metaphor for the five-sided ribose molecule that was taken from him for purposes of cloning. These two were unlawfully fused against the will of the Father to make our current form of genetics we call DNA, and is why Jacob prophesied that his son Dan, D-A-N, whose name is an anagram for DNA, would be a serpent, or serpenta, in the way, and why our DNA is called serpentine. This is because the Greek word for 6 is sera, S-E-R-A, and the Greek word for 5 is penta, P-E-N-T-A. DNA in its current form, therefore, is the serpent, or serpenta, comprised of a six-sided phosphate molecule, or pyran, and a five-sided ribose molecule. The har, H-A-R, is the law, or genetic code, that was misused to make our Frankenstein-like bodies possible, and won't pass away or be sheared until the fullness of time, or until all is fulfilled, which is what Yesu, or Jesus, means in the words attributed to him in Matthew 5:17 through 19. This is also the reason that the wheat and the tares are being allowed to grow up together until the time of separation, as spoken of in Matthew 13:30. The phosphate, or pyran, is also what the Great Pyramid at Giza represents, which is why at the time that the temples of our bodies are destroyed, the physical temple, the pyramid, and likely the Temple of Solomon, also built by the Anunnaki, or otherwise known as Yahweh, and both of which are symbols of the human body, will also be destroyed or sheared, leaving not one stone upon another. Again, these stones referred to are metaphors for the same stones of fire stolen by Lucifer, who is also a pseudonym or alias for Yahweh, in Ezekiel 28, 14, and 16, referring to our ribose and phosphates. You can also see Matthew 24:2 and Mark 13:2. These stones of fire that Lucifer stole at the time of the Great Rebellion, however, also include yet another six-sided molecule, which is the basis for all life forms, and that other stone is carbon. The thing you need to know about the carbon molecule is that it is not only six-sided, but also has 6 protons, 6 neutrons, and 6 electrons. When the figure Lucifer, disguised as the Lord God and hidden behind the alias of the letters YHWH, created Adam, she put upon him her mark, and in doing so, quite literally created a beast. This is why carbon, that molecule of which you are comprised, is the true mark of the beast, and is simply one more reason why it must be sheared from the true sheep of the Good Shepherd, who know their Father's voice and hear what he is saying to them. Ribosomes and phosphates, by the way, are also the stones of fire used as a covering by Lucifer, as she is between them and inside of us, and has covered, just like Yahweh, Rebecca, Mary, and others covered. This is why she is referred to as the covering cherub in those verses in Ezekiel 28. And Mary Magdalene covered Asu's feet with her har also, as you'll recall. I talk about this in detail in my paper entitled Pyranosis at innercircle.us. If you read that paper, you will understand full well why this mark that is already in you has allowed you to buy and sell, just as prophesied that it will in the Bible, and how it is already on your quote-unquote right hand and on your quote-unquote forehead. When the word carbon is broken down into the logograms of the Sumerian cuneiform, it is rendered as har-bun, H-A-R, plus the logogram B-U-N. The logogram bun means rebellion, and once again, har is simply a shrouded reference to the strand of genetic material that was stolen. When we put these two together as har-bun, it is no surprise that the meaning is the genetics or DNA of the rebellion. This is because, once again, this is what was stolen during the rebellion. The planet Saturn is also represented by a six-sided hexagon on its north pole. Saturn is also referred to as Jinn, G-I-N, in the Sumerian language, as well as D-J-I-N-N in Arabic, and is the same word for a stone called lapis lazuli, which is not only part of the Holy Grail, which I speak about in my paper entitled The Holy Grail and the letters YHWH, but is also bright blue in color. Pardon me. This is the reason that those who say they are Jews, see Revelation 2:9 and 3:9, say they are Jews, fly the six-sided star on their flag, and why the rabbis have one blue fringe called a teklet on the bottom of their robes, representing the phosphate and carbon nestled between the chromosomes of the strands of DNA. This is the true meaning of the words we read in Isaiah 14:13 and Nahum 3:16, which state, respectively, "For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars," meaning the rib or five-sided ribose, "of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north, and thou hast multiplied thy merchants above the stars. Those who were complicit in this unlawful genetic merging are of the synagogue, meaning temple or body, of Satan, known as Saturn, Remphan Kayun in Amos and Acts, Molech, Baal, and other names, and literally worship Saturn, symbolized by the Great Pyramid, the monument under which they all have literally hidden before in the days of old, to escape the wrath of the coming fire and water. This is why Esau stated in Matthew 24:16, Mark 13:14, and Luke 21:21 that when the abomination of desolation is standing in the holy place, which it already is, by the way, and you can learn more about that at the inner circle, that we are to let those in Judea flee to the mountains. The word mountains is a direct reference to the holy mountains or pyramids at Giza, which sit on the west bank of the Nile River, which, interestingly, used to be the southern border of Israel. This is also spoken of in Zechariah 14:5 and is explained in detail in my paper entitled The Great Pyramid, Who Built It and What Does It Mean at the Inner Circle. Now, I've told this story many times before, but I want you to start putting the pieces together because these things are going to happen soon. This is not just a fairy tale like those told by the Jews with hidden messages, or the scribes of the Old Testament. I've uncovered these things and dug them out from underneath what the Bible calls Jewish fables in Titus 1:14 so that you can know the truth and be free. It's important to know what to do to be free, though, which is why I'm sharing these things with you. And I go into detail about that at the Learning Network. These events are leading up to the culmination known as repentance, which means the going back to or giving back of the five, the penta, which is a reference to the rib or the ribose that was stolen from Adam by Yahweh or Lucifer to mix the reptilian seed, the phosphorus and carbon to create the DNA of humanity. Elohim knew we were not good in our current form, which is why they tried to destroy us twice, once by fire in a hidden story in Genesis 2:1-3, and later by a flood, beginning in Genesis 6. Remember, when something is terminated, it is literally brought to an end. When something is exterminated, however, the true termination, that which we wrongly call life, brought on us by the rebel who was seduced by her knowledge of genetics and who stole the seed for sinful purposes, is undone. That termination is undone when we are exterminated. To be exterminated, therefore, by the Father is a loving act that will bring us into our true state, or back to our first estate, and once again back to Him. This is how the theft of the woman is going to be reconciled, and how the hearts of the sons are going to be returned to the Red Father. See Malachi 4:6. We've had ample opportunity to do this, but it's a difficult task, and the process is extremely arduous. See Matthew 16:24 and Mark 8:34. It is also a bit frightening when those verses outlining the instructions for the process of true repentance are translated correctly, which brings up the next point. The other thing that is going to be sheared is that behavior which was brought on or made possible by the phosphate or the pyrran, which was the ability to procreate through sexual intercourse. As a hint, this is what Esau means, quite literally, when he says, "If any man would come after me," or meaning to go where I am going, "he must take up his cross and follow me." The word for cross here is the Greek word stauros, which is just another name for the obelisk, the tall, thin monuments which look like a pyramid at the top. The stauros, or the obelisk, represents the phallus, just like the pyramid does, which is why it too will be destroyed when all of this takes place. This is the purpose of the covenant of circumcision between Elohim, who once again attempted to destroy man at least twice before by fire and flood, and Abraham. It was not the foreskin that was to be cut off, but the actual pedunda vitae, which is in the Latin means, quite literally, the genitals. It actually refers to the sex organs of both males and females, and is why some African tribes still cut off the sex organs or clitoris of the woman, even today. Sex and the organs necessary for that act, for the purposes of procreation, was one result of the phosphate, Lucifer's seed, or the pyran, being fused to the rib or fruit that was stolen. Evidence of this comes from the Sumerian logograms Tur and Dis, T-U-R and D-I-S, meaning Saturn, which is what they quite literally mean in the cuneiform, and pronounced tortoise, representative also of the shape of the UFOs, as tortoise shells or domes from that same place. This is why you see the bad UFOs often represented as tortoise shell-shaped discs or dishes. The logogram dis is also pronounced dish. Tur and dis, or tortoise, not only means Saturn in the Sumerian language, but also translates as birth hut of man or birth hut of the penis. As the Africans know, it really is a reference to both the clitoris and the penis, as they are really one and the same, just as men and women are, at one time, both female in the womb. As always, science shows us more evidence that the red is approaching for a repentance to undo what was done and return us to the original Adamic or hermaphroditic state, so we are once again able to keep our seed in us, as Asu stated we are to do, as he who is from above in 1 John 3:9. Currently, about 1 in 250 children are born with both male and female sex organs, similar to what would be called androgynous or hermaphroditic, many more than ever before. Interestingly, there is also another phenotype, or outward appearance, that is occurring that has a similar ratio of 1 in 250. Can you guess what it is? If you guessed red hair, you are right. About 1 in every 250 children is born with red hair. These two occurrences are connected, and what is happening is the resurgence of the red as a fulfillment of prophecy. Isaac told Esau, and his son, the firstborn, in Genesis 27:40, after his mother had stolen his birthright and given it to Jacob, the blue, whose name was changed to Israel in Genesis 32:28 and 35:10, that the day would come when Esau would have dominion and would break the yoke of his brother off of his neck that was placed there unlawfully. And that day is quickly coming. And if you haven't asked yourself already, what yoke have we been under, maybe you should. If the Father is truly the good shepherd, as we are told, and he and his son Asu are one, as we are told in John 10:30, then this shearing or reaping can only be a good thing, to bring us, just like the prodigal sons that we've become, back to him. And just in case you may still be wondering how the red dragon can be viewed as good, when in Revelation 12:9 it says that a dragon was cast out and refers to it as the serpent, Satan, and the devil, let me clarify. Firstly, there are two different serpents or dragons, just like in our double helix DNA, and just as is depicted in the symbol representing the medical profession. One of them is good, and unfortunately, the one that was cast out, just as it tells us in that same verse, is currently ruling over us on earth, the place where she was cast. This would be the blue dragon, Lucifer, Satan, or Saturn. And if you read that, you'll understand full well that it's full of ambiguity. That's why it's important to break these things down and to research them and to do proper exegesis, which usually means going back to the Sumerian. This ruling dragon, being from Saturn, is represented by the same symbol that represents Saturn, the hexagon found on its north pole, represented today as the blue six-pointed star. The red dragon, as I've already shown, is the Father, or who we think of as God. He is the creator in the true sense of the word, rather than simply a molder of another person's creation, which is what Yahweh was doing to Adam's genetics in chapter 2 of Genesis. Also, the word dragon is used here to confuse and to paint a picture, just like in the movies that they put out, of a vicious, violent, fire-breathing, malevolent creature with malicious intent. The word dragon in the Hebrew language is the word drakon, meaning a dragon or serpent, but it is of uncertain origin, as you'll notice if you look at the various concordances. They speculate that it is from the word derkomai, and which means to look.
Looking at a photo that was taken by J.S. Henrardi, captured in Belgium in 1990 and shown only many years after. Crow 777 also caught many exceptional videos throughout his years of research on the surface of the moon. Imagine seeing this at night going by. You'd think there were several objects, or of course one objects with all these burners underneath. We saw, like I said again, Crow 77, check it out. He caught one of these vehicles. Maybe not that shape, but maybe so, but has the same burners underneath and actually activate themselves as they're leaving. I want to also talk about lenticular clouds. They look like UFOs, and they're stationary clouds. They're forming inside of the troposphere, typically in perpendicular alignment to the wind direction, and they're getting these forms. They're comparable in appearance to a lens or a flying saucer. Three main types of lenticular clouds. I won't get into it, but depending on how high in the sky they are, they have different names for them. And because of their unique appearance, they've been brought forward as an explanation for some unidentified flying object sightings. Check it out, guys. This is the Avro Canada VZ9 Avrocar. The Avrocar was a VTOL aircraft developed by Avro Canada as part of a secret U.S. military project carried out in the early years of the Cold War. The Avrocar intended to exploit the Coanda effect to provide lift and thrust from a single tuber rotor, blowing exhaust out of the rim of the disc-shaped aircraft in the air. It would have resembled a flying saucer. Abolished in 1961, I believe, and it was very wobbly. It was supposed to be designed as military combat aircraft, very high altitudes and very fast speeds. These are all pictures that, for me in my past, have marked me and that I remembered all my life. This is July 30th, 1952. We're the 25th now. It was almost the anniversary there. And here it is close up. Just, the typical end of 1947, beginning in 1950s crafts that we could see usually shown publicly, like the rare photos. This is at the factory, the Avro car being built. An astronaut during the STS-115 mission, this is a photo from NASA, the astronaut caught this object. No matter what it was, obviously passed off for debris. This diagram depicts many different countries all over the world, different shapes and forms and sizes of aircrafts that were seen, with various details that were taken into consideration over many years. Say to yourself, some people have some exceptional information about these UFOs. So I guess, okay, this is a funny picture that somebody grabbed their lamp, I guess, because you could clearly see that it's a shell lamp. You can even see the base of the lamp that's on the white ceiling there, and you can see that there's clouds on the bottom sort of to hide the fact that they tampered with the photo, I guess. I'm not going to accuse anyone, but it looks fake as hell. UFO photographed over Lake Cote, Costa Rica, September 1971. Look how it's bent out of shape. You wonder how these objects, along the laws of physics and gravity, can actually levitate. A news notice printed in Nuremberg on April 4th, 1561, describing the Nuremberg mass sighting. Discs and spheres were said to emerge from large cylinders. Look at the photo here that we're seeing over top. We could see that it's just clearly depicting it under the sun in the sky. The cylinders and these objects were coming out of the ends of the cylinders. And look underneath, a dark object that we can see here. And this is from 1561. Here's another one that happened in 1566, a couple of years after, declaring that there were black objects, spherical objects, flying through the sky. Here's an awesome one, an old postcard from the beginning of the 1900s that we see a UFO on this postcard. Fake or real? You be the judge. Today, a very popular, secretive, hidden military base. I don't think it's very hidden, Area 51. Here's one of the entrances. We can see, obviously, here's from Tikaboo Peak, the view of Area 51. Here as we zoom in. A very important person, a famous whistleblower, gave us a heads up about what was going on there. Bob Lazar claims to have worked on reverse engineering extraterrestrial technology at a site called S4 near the Area 51 test facility, and that the UFOs use gravity wave propulsion. This is powered by the element 115. Here is another picture of So Long Me lenticular clouds. It's posted as a UFO photo. You can see it's lenticular clouds. We got enough of a hard time to see UFOs. People are always joking around, but seriously, they're interesting clouds. They really are interesting clouds, and to watch them form, they're just exceptional. Check this out. Egyptian hieroglyphs, maybe helicopters, airplanes, UFOs, boats. I don't know. This is Egyptian hieroglyphs, and obviously, on the walls there are depictions of animals, objects. It's a pretty intriguing thing to ponder, and I've been looking into this a long time too, and obviously I don't think anyone knows themselves what it means, but I think these are all warning signs. I mean, they just literally look like objects, flying objects. And here's another one, and it looks like it's moving. When you zoom up on these photos, it's very easy to see if these objects were put into the photos. You'll see pixelation. If you stretch the photo, you will also see squares or lines or cutouts, and this one looks original. But again, not easy to find out which pictures are real or not just by looking at them. You sort of have to edit some of them and look into them a bit more in detail.